Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I'm back. I think this video will be about 10 minutes long, which, of course, in today's world is an eternity, but I'm going to give you a quick preview, and it might actually tell you everything you need to know. But it will certainly tell you whether it's worth hanging out and listening to me unpack some of the details. I'm going to tell a four-part story today about Stimuleyes. Part 1 is about Stimuleyes 1.0, also known as the 9% amniotic fluid preservative-free unapproved biologic eye drop in the wrong bottle. Part 2 is about Stimuleyes 2.0, also known as same shit, different state. Part 3 is about the FDA warning letter to the manufacturer of Stimuleyes 1.0. And Part 4 is where we speculate about what happens next. Will it be the release of Stimuleyes 3.0, which is suggested by the very recent online disappearance of Stimuleyes 2.0 product descriptions and by things spoken in low voices at recent trade show? Or will there first be, or perhaps already has been, since these things aren't made public immediately, an FDA warning letter about Stimuleyes 2.0? Let's get started. Part 1, Stimuleyes 1.0. So what is Stimuleyes? Well, a minute ago, I called it a 9% amniotic fluid, preservative-free, unapproved biologic eye drop in the wrong bottle. So I'm going to unpack that for the benefit of people who are new to biologiceyedrops.org and haven't watched any of Dr. B's videos. First of all, I need to explain that Stimuleyes 1.0 came and went before we'd ever even heard of it. But it's only about 3 years now, and thankfully there's no real mystery about it. Stimuleyes is an eye drop sold by a company called M2 Biologics, which is a joint venture between a large, well-known optical group in Georgia called McGee and a large PPO, or Preferred Provider Organization, in the Southeast region called Novanet. Stimuleyes comes in a 5.5 ml bottle. For reference, a typical preservative-free OTC drop comes in a 10 ml bottle like this. So that's a little over half. And Stimuleyes sells for about $200 to $225 a bottle. It's generally sold by doctors, but it can be purchased online, I checked again just now, from at least one specialty dry eye retailer. Last I checked, there was no prescription required. Stimuleyes does not have a national drug code, or NDC. That means it's not registered anywhere as an over-the-counter drug or a prescription drug or anything else. And if you've watched any of Dr. B's presentations on this site, you might recall her repeatedly saying, they're just invisible. But we know Stimuleyes is real because we know real doctors recommend and sell it, and real patients buy it and use it. And as a matter of fact, the first time I ever heard of it was from a very nice local ophthalmologist in my small town of 12,000 people here in Washington State. The M2 Biologics website tells us that Stimuleyes eye drops are made from amniotic fluid. Actually, it doesn't say that anymore because a few days ago they removed all the product description pages from their website, but with a little Googling you'll find it, or you can at least get it off of Wayback Machine. I promise they really did used to say this, but fact check me by all means. Now, amniotic fluid products sold for medical purposes have a pretty serious regulatory hurdle, if I can put it that way, which has somehow in the dry eye world become chronically, let's call it, overlooked. Contrary to what many people have been led to believe, the FDA is uncharacteristically clear about their position on amniotic fluid. And I mean crystal clear. They say very clearly and repeatedly, you cannot legally sell amniotic fluid products for any medical use without going through the biologic prescription drug approval process. This information is on the FDA website, and they communicated all of it to me and much more in a series of personal emails in response to a question I raised about a different biologic eye drop last April. At that time, I didn't even know that the other drop was made from amniotic fluid, but I've learned a few things since then. I absolutely encourage you to fact check me about the legality of amniotic fluid products for medical indications. The appropriate FDA phone numbers and email addresses are plastered all over the biologiceyedrops.org website for your convenience, lest anyone just believe us without verifying. Now, some companies are going around pretending that amniotic fluid is actually a tissue in liquid form, using terms like a liquid allograft, saying that functionally it works like amniotic membrane, which is regulated differently, but just happens to be a liquid. The only problem with that is it's actually nonsense. I mean, come on, tissue doesn't live in a bottle. You can't drip tissue out of a bottle. Whatever it is you are dripping out of the bottle does not, by any stretch of the imagination, form a sheet of protective solid matter on the surface of your eye. Diluted amniotic fluid sold in a bottle is an eye drop, and it is a biologic drug, according to the FDA, who said so in a warning letter recently to a manufacturer of such a drop. Bottom line, amniotic fluid is what's known as a secreted product, and when it's sold for medical purposes, it has to go through drug approval. There's no free pass. Some people have made it their job to make this issue seem confusing when it's not. They want to convince you that amniotic fluid lives in this regulatory gray area, but it doesn't. The FDA is actually surprisingly black and white about it. Fact check me. Email, phone, search the FDA website. Now, notwithstanding all this regulatory stuff, here at the Dry Eye Foundation, our initial concern with Stimuleyes was all about the bottle, which also has regulatory implications, but never mind. To us, it's about safety, because we all, patients, doctors, industry, we all know that preservative-free eye drops, prescription, OTC, no matter what they're made of, they have to be packaged in either single-use vials, or if they're going to be in a bottle, they need to be in the special bottle type that has the filter mechanism to keep it from sucking bad stuff back into the bottle after you squeeze a drop out. That packaging requirement is true even of preservative-free eye drops made from what we consumers affectionately refer to as those nasty chemicals from Big Pharma, like propylene glycol and carboxymethylcellulose. But when we're talking about an eye drop from a natural biologic substance whose main claim to fame is that it contains proteins, it might be worth thinking about the fact that proteins make great bacteria food, which means having the right kind of bottle might be even more important so we can avoid dripping bacteria onto our eyes. So when we found that there were multiple biologic products in inappropriate bottles being pushed out there in the dry eye market, that is what motivated us to start the public education project known as biologiceyedrops.org. Explaining the bottle problem was the first mission of the website, and it was the subject of Dr. B's very first video on our blog, still there. So that's my introduction to Stimuleyes 1.0. I took a few detours, sorry. Like I said, amniotic fluid, preservative-free, unapproved, biologic eye drop in the wrong bottle. I'll get to the 9% part in a minute. And don't worry, the rest of the video will go by much faster, although I'll try not to talk faster. So part 2 is about Stimuleyes 2.0. Same shit, different state. When I say same shit, I mean diluted amniotic fluid. And please forgive my use of a vulgarity and this particular vulgarity in the context, especially since it's not really accurate. After 20 weeks of pregnancy, amniotic fluid is mostly baby pee, not poo, or so says the internet. Now, I said diluted amniotic fluid, right? Of course, we're not really putting 100% amniotic fluid in our eyes. When Dr. B reached out to the contract manufacturer of Stimuleyes 2.0, they very kindly explained to her that they use half a cc of amniotic fluid per 5 cc's of saline. That makes it a 9% amniotic fluid solution. Feel free to double check my math. Half a cc, 5 cc's. When M2 Biologics first put Stimuleyes on the market, they seem to have been using a contract manufacturer in Arizona called Biolab Sciences. But sometime, and actually not necessarily all that long after Biolab Sciences got started, M2 Biologics switched to a different contract manufacturer. This one is called Neobiosis, and it's in Florida, which is quite handy because M2 Biologics is next door in Georgia. We don't know why M2 Biologics ditched Biolab Sciences. Maybe they were just too far away. But we do know that Biolab Sciences fell foul of the FDA in a pretty spectacular way, roughly around the same time period. So it would not be completely unreasonable to imagine that those two events are related. You may or may not know this, but the FDA, at the best of times, moves at a glacial pace. I spent some time back in the spring studying their enforcement action history, and it was fascinating how long this stuff takes. That is FDA normal. And now we have additional slowdowns. Number one, we have read and been told by many sources that the FDA is simply unable to keep on top of illegal regenerative medicine businesses, which are sprouting everywhere all over the country. Papers have been written about this problem for a few years now. It's a serious concern. Number two, we've also been told, this won't be a surprise to anyone, that COVID made everything a lot harder because it sucked up a lot of resources from the FDA's biologics division, which is just, not difficult to believe. Despite all that, the FDA actually did manage to go out and inspect the manufacture of Stimuleyes 1.0 in Arizona back in August 2021. And then, right on schedule, a year later, they communicated with that company, with the manufacturer, about the results of their inspection in something called a warning letter, which to a manufacturer is a scary thing that you do not want to have show up on your doorstep. And a month after that, they made the warning letter public. That was about 2 weeks ago. And that brings us to part 3 of my story, the warning letter about Stimuleyes 1.0. The FDA's warning letter to Biolab Sciences, which covers other products, not just Stimuleyes, is 8 pages long, at least on my printer. It's written in the FDA's own special vernacular. I've posted links to it, and you can read it in full, and I encourage you especially to look for words relating to sterility. I don't want to bore you with the technicalities. It's really just 2 take-homes from this letter, and then I want to share another personal take-home. One, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter who's manufacturing this stuff or how, from a legal standpoint, because it's totally illegal to be selling an amniotic fluid ophthalmic product in any way, shape, or form in the first place without approval. And this letter spells that out very clearly and lists all the relevant federal regs, which just happen to be very similar or exactly the same as what we've been posting on our website for some time in a summary information document for eye care providers. Number 2, since they were manufacturing and selling it, well, the FDA are realists. They seem to think it was important to note that they were doing a really bad job and that there were lots of things to be concerned about, like really dirty clean rooms. If you want to know more, read the letter yourself. For me, the most important take-home was this. If I was selling a drug and my contract manufacturer was proven to be doing a bad job and I went and got another one, I would want to have a pretty high confidence level that my new one was better, right? So we wondered, did that happen in this case? Is Stimuleyes 2.0 in good hands? I have no way to determine that. It's not my business to determine that, and I have no intention of casting aspersions without any evidence. But I will say that I am concerned about the fact that their new contract manufacturer, Neobiosis, is not registered with the FDA as a drug manufacturing establishment. And as far as we've been able to determine, they have never been inspected by the FDA. If you know otherwise, please get in touch and tell me what Dr. B and I are missing or have somehow overlooked in our research. I'm going to share with you now my concern about potentially unregulated manufacturing facilities doing things with amniotic fluid for ophthalmic uses. After we saw the FDA's warning letter to Biolab Sciences, which was made public September 20, I wanted some context. So I amused myself one day by studying the FDA's warning letters to manufacturers of amniotic fluid products for other medical purposes, not eye drops. And what I saw was scary. I'm not talking about theoretical problems and paperwork failures and speeding tickets. I'm talking about dirty clean rooms. I'm talking about donor screening failures and testing failures. I'm talking about actual instances of things like E. coli entering commercial distribution in amniotic fluid products and actual reports of people getting infected. And I have to believe that the bare possibility of disease transmission through an improperly manufactured eye drop would give you as much pause as it gives us. These are some of the kinds of concerns that fuel our public education campaign about biologic eye drops. And now we come to phase 4, where we have to ask, what's next? Is it going to be Stimuleyes 3.0, or is there any possibility that an FDA warning letter about Stimuleyes 2.0 is looming? So where did I get the idea that Stimuleyes 3.0 might be on the way? Like I said, their website has shrunk. The product descriptions went away. There's been a rumor that they might be changing their drop to over-the-counter. So if the website pages come back with changes, that's really what I mean by Stimuleyes 3.0. As for the possibility of another FDA warning letter, this time about Stimuleyes 2.0, that could only happen after the current manufacturer, Neobiosis, has been inspected, and the FDA does not share that information until well after the fact. For all we know, they may already have been inspected, or they may be on a schedule for a visit in 2024, or they may not be on a schedule at all because, like I said, they're not even registered as a drug establishment. We don't know. All we can do is keep our eyes and ears open and share what we find. So that's my story about Stimuleyes. And my hope is that I have encouraged you to take a little less for granted about biologic products in today's market and to consider doing a little bit of your own due diligence, at least that one little call or email to the FDA. The premise of biologiceyedrops.org has always been the idea that we can educate people about questionable biologic drugs and issues related to them faster than the FDA can regulate them. But even education is a very slow process. At this point, though, we suspect we might be starting to move the needle at least a teensy bit, and we take heart from that. Bye for now.